Hello class, my name is David.Pohl, and this will be my presentation on expanded information concerning the DIKA model and its application. In the past few weeks, the DIKA model has stuck out to me as one of the more interesting and applicable topics to my own personal life, and hopefully through this you'll be able to see ways that you can further apply it at your own jobs. We're going to be going over what the model is, breaking down its individual parts. We're going to be talking about some shortcomings or some pitfalls, some problems that you can get into when you're applying the model. And with that, we're going to incorporate some current events with a business that most people can relate to. And then from there, we're going to explain how further research this week has shed some light on how the model can be applied in our own lives, at our own jobs, in order to be more successful. So as we said, just breaking it down, the model's fairly simple. Data is the first letter. These are just the fundamental building blocks of information that you're going to be sifting through in order to solve a problem. Information with a capital I, though, is the data that is identified as actually being relevant to the problem that you're trying to solve. You're going to have a lot of data to pick and choose from. Most of it probably is not going to be useful. However, the creative part of this comes in identifying what is useful and how it interacts with other pieces of information, which gets us into knowledge. Knowledge being the framework for how the information relates to each other in order to solve a problem. Now, knowledge in a workplace can take a couple of different forms. You can have tacit knowledge, which is stuff that's hard to define. If you were to say that a certain individual at work just has a quote unquote knack for doing well at their job, but you don't go into details as to why, that could be possibly defined as tacit knowledge. It's just something that they're good at that goes beyond explanation. We also have explicit knowledge. This is the kind of knowledge that could be transferred from person to person. Anybody should be able to pick it up. It could be written down. It could be on the data file saved within your organization. But the ability to apply it really just depends on somebody's willingness and aptitude to pick it up. Then from there, something else that was discussed during the course of class was tribal knowledge. This would be knowledge coming from a group of people who have been around each other for a significant period of time to where they've developed this sort of group-based knowledge where they have an understanding of how to solve a problem based on history and interaction with the event. So the fact that they exist as a sort of tribe is why we would call this tribal knowledge. And then from there, the whole point of this is to apply some type of action. A decision needs to be made and implemented, and that decision and that action could be successful or unsuccessful, either based on the quality of the decision being made or how the implementation of that change is taken on. A quick graphic, a lot of us have seen this from the text, just shows the model going from large to small, left to right. This is to suggest that the process is best undergone in a linear fashion, starting with a large amount of data and then slowly feeding down information, knowledge, and then a specific action. Now, that action could either succeed or fail, but either way, it's providing you with more data moving forward professionally, as indicated by the arrow at the bottom of the screen. There are several variations of the DIKA model, and by variations, we really start to look at these as pitfalls or failures in the model where some part was not applied properly, and as a result, the model failed. The first indicated here shows a lot of data and information being gathered, but not really that much knowledge or action being taken. We see this a lot in political environments, and not just on a world stage, but office politics could influence us, where data and information are being collected, but there could be competing groups within an organization who disagree fundamentally with how the information is being presented. It could be that it paints them in a negative light or is too advantageous for the other organization, in which case we keep going through this data and information grab without a consensus ever being taken, where smart minds get together, compare knowledge, and take action to create positive change moving forward. Another example of this is the spread indicated in the bottom graphic here, where data and information are gathered. You could eventually get to a knowledge and action solution, but the time frame in between is far too long. One example that comes to mind is the tech industry. An organization could be working with a certain type of software that has a lot of bugs, and so a team could be identified to go in and search for all the bugs, gather data and then information, and then eventually they could compare knowledge and take action to solve the problem, the bug in their software. But they've taken so much time that by the time they have an actual solution, the organization is working with a completely new software version with a whole new set of bugs, a whole new set of problems, and that timeline gap was just too large. So that's an example of a spread in the data information and knowledge action process. Probably one of the more interesting concepts, and what we're going to get into details with in the next slide, is when knowledge and action, perhaps due to arrogance or overconfidence, are used to guide all of the decision-making processes without actually getting a fresh pull on new data and information as society changes. You may all be familiar with the retail giant Forever 21. They're very popular in malls and they cater largely to clothing for a demographic of young 20s to late 30-year-old crowds. Recent journal publications have suggested that Forever 21 could be declaring bankruptcy in the near future. Several problems have taken place in the past few years that have set this up. The company attempted some aggressive expansion and currently hold approximately 800 store locations. A decline in mall traffic due to online purchasing is something that was not foreseen, and Forever 21 was not able to adapt its methodology in time to account for this. As a result, they could be potentially closing at least 100 of their 800 stores in the near future. There are previous stores with similar demographics to Forever 21, and by demographic I mean the age group. A few of those are American Apparel, Wet Seal, Delia's, and Aeropostale. And what do all those stores have in common? They have all closed or declared bankruptcy within the past 5 years. As stated earlier, one of the bigger problems is that their demographic is largely more interested in online purchasing rather than going to a store over the past 5 to 10 years. Now, a recent news release by Asian News International had stated that in January of this year, Forever 21 did make an attempt to update their website in order to make it more user friendly for online purchasing and offering a lot more deals while shopping online. This, however, was obviously too little too late, and this is an example of reactionary problem solving as opposed to proactive problem solving. They allowed the problem to develop first, being perhaps too confident in their knowledge and action decision making policies, and then started to realize that they needed to go after a new data and information pool to see how their demographic preferred to live their lives. They had a good knowledge base of what their demographic liked to purchase, but they had failed to keep up with the times as far as how they like to go about the purchasing process. So how do we relate this concept to our own lives, our own jobs? Forever 21, for example, is a major organization with thousands of employees. Not all companies are that big or taking that much risk or even operating in malls. The company I myself work for has less than 100 employees. But some of the information through further research this week has led to the same conclusions about the DIKA model. One is that it requires follow through. Every step has to be in place in order for the model to work. As we saw in earlier slides, if too much emphasis is placed on data information, not knowledge and action, then we don't have a solution, as well as the opposite of that. Really, there needs to be a mediator following the process and supervising each phase of the process to make sure that it gets pushed along and doesn't fizzle out over time. Secondly, success relies on the buy-in of all organizational levels. By this, I mean mostly that once an action is taken, that action and the benefits of what that change is going to create need to be explained to lower levels of employees. The text made mention of this and referred to these as examples with the Dilbert comics, where corporate America is made fun of, where employees kind of make jokes about senior leadership creating some kind of new action plan or some kind of change, but those decisions were made behind closed doors, and the real effect and the intent of how those decisions would better everybody's lives were not explained at the lower levels, and so the plan just kind of fizzled out, or some new trendy plan was put into place in a very short time. And finally, the model needs to be applied methodically even when no problem exists. As we saw in the last slide, Forever 21 was too late to go through this process, realize that the problem existed, and then take some kind of corrective action. What really needs to happen is, even when a problem doesn't exist, that just means that we are not seeing the problem that is about to hit us in the face. There needs to constantly be a new data pool, new information being brought in. If they would have done that a lot earlier, they probably would have seen how this trend was affecting their entire organization's model of having large stores in mall locations without that much of an online presence, and they would have solved the issue before it came up and potentially destroyed the company. We'll see what happens with them in the next coming years, but what's been posted online in a lot of journal posts does not seem incredibly promising. That concludes this presentation. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them in the posts, either down below, or you can post to the actual Embry-Riddle site. Thank you.